The sun cast long, violent shadows across the churning waters of the Rio Grande as Theresa Reynolds thrashed against the ropes binding her wrists, her heart pounding with the terrifying certainty that she was about to die. "Please," she begged, the wooden plank beneath her feet creaking ominously as the river's current slapped against the makeshift dock. "I didn't steal anything. I swear it on my mother's grave." The year was 1878, and Nogales, Arizona Territory, was a place where justice came swift and often without mercy. The border town straddling the line between the United States and Mexico had attracted its share of outlaws, opportunists, and those seeking a fresh start in the untamed West. Theresa had been among the latter, arriving just 3 weeks prior with dreams that now seemed foolishly naive. Jasper Wilkes, the self-appointed leader of the Vigilance Committee and owner of the largest saloon in Nogales, sneered as he prodded her closer to the edge with the barrel of his shotgun. Behind him stood 5 other men, their faces grim beneath their wide-brimmed hats. "3 witnesses saw you take that money pouch," Wilkes spat. "And everyone knows you've been flashing silver dollars all week. Where'd a woman like you get that kind of money if not by thieving? I earned it." Theresa protested, her brown eyes wild with desperation as her boots slipped against the damp wood. Her dark hair hung in disheveled waves around her tear-streaked face. "I've been sewing for Mrs. Holloway. Ask her yourself, Mrs. Holloway says she paid you $2, not 15, Wilkes countered. "This town's got no room for thieves. Consider this a lesson for anyone else thinking of stealing from honest folk." Theresa glanced desperately toward the riverbank where a small crowd had gathered. Some looked away uncomfortably, but none spoke up. At 23 years old, she had survived the loss of her parents, a broken engagement, and the grueling journey west. She refused to die for a crime she didn't commit. "One more step," Wilkes ordered, jabbing the gun harder against her back. Half a mile upriver, Isaac Blackett pulled his horse to a stop, his attention caught by commotion near the river crossing. From his vantage point atop a small rise, he could make out a cluster of men and a woman standing at the end of a wooden dock that extended into the river. Something about the scene struck him as wrong. At 28, Isaac had seen enough frontier justice to recognize the makings of a lynching when he saw one. He'd spent the last 5 years working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas before finally deciding to try his luck further west. He'd arrived in Nogales just yesterday, hoping to find work at one of the local ranches. Without hesitation, Isaac spurred his buckskin gelding toward the river, covering the distance in mere minutes. As he approached, he recognized Wilkes from the saloon the night before, a man whose reputation for cruelty had preceded him. When Isaac saw the woman with her hands bound, fear etched across her face as she teetered at the end of a plank, he knew his instincts had been right. "What's going on here?" Isaac called out, his voice carrying over the murmuring crowd as he dismounted and pushed his way through. "Justice, stranger," Wilkes replied without turning. "This woman's a thief, caught her red-handed." Isaac took in the scene quickly. The woman looked terrified but not guilty. Her clothes, while simple, were neat and well-mended, not the typical attire of a common thief. "Seems to me like proper justice involves a trial," Isaac said, stepping closer. His hand rested casually near the Colt revolver at his hip. "Last I checked, the law doesn't allow for drowning suspects." Wilkes finally turned to face him, revealing a face weathered by sun and whiskey. "You're new here. This is how we handle things in Nogales. Mind your own business, cowboy." A tense silence fell over the gathering. Isaac measured his next words carefully, aware that he was outnumbered. "I'm making it my business," he said evenly. "Let her go, and if she's guilty, take her to the sheriff." Theresa seized the momentary distraction to glance at her would-be defender. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes beneath the brim of a dusty brown hat, he stood with the confident posture of a man accustomed to danger. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment she felt a flicker of hope. Wilkes laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Sheriff's out of town until tomorrow, and we don't need some drifter telling us." He never finished the sentence. With a sudden, violent shove, one of Wilkes' men pushed Theresa forward. She screamed as the plank tilted and she plunged into the river, the weight of her skirts immediately dragging her down. The current, swollen from recent rains, caught her instantly. "No!" Isaac shouted, already moving. Without hesitation, he sprinted the few steps to the edge of the dock and dove into the churning waters. The cold hit him like a physical blow, but years of swimming in Texas rivers had prepared him for the shock. He surfaced quickly, scanning for any sign of the woman. The current was strong, pulling him downstream as he searched desperately for a glimpse of her. There, about 20 yards downstream, he caught sight of dark hair breaking the surface. With powerful strokes, Isaac cut through the water toward her. He could hear shouting from the shore, but he focused entirely on reaching the drowning woman. When he finally got to her, Theresa was struggling weakly, half-conscious and sputtering. Isaac wrapped one arm around her waist and began swimming toward the bank with his free arm. The weight of her waterlogged clothes made progress difficult, but determination drove him forward. "I've got you," he reassured her between breaths. "Just hold on." By the time they reached the shallows, a crowd had gathered along the riverbank. Isaac staggered to his feet, carrying Theresa in his arms. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with blue, but she was breathing. Relief washed over him as her eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on his face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Wilkes and his men had vanished, unwilling to face the consequences of what they'd done. In their place, an older woman pushed through the onlookers, her expression concerned. "Bring her to my house," the woman said, already removing her shawl to wrap around Theresa's shoulders. "It's just up the hill. I'm Mrs. Patterson." Isaac nodded gratefully and followed the woman away from the river. As they walked, he could feel Theresa shivering violently in his arms. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Theresa," she replied through chattering teeth. "Theresa Reynolds." "Isaac Blackett," he offered in return. "Don't worry, Miss Reynolds. You're safe now." Mrs. Patterson's house was modest but clean, with cheerful curtains at the windows and a large fireplace that she immediately stoked to a roaring blaze. She directed Isaac to place Theresa on a chair near the fire, then shooed him into the kitchen while she helped the young woman change into dry clothes. Isaac stood dripping on the wooden floor, suddenly aware of his own sodden state. He removed his hat and ran a hand through his wet hair, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He'd only intended to pass through Nogales on his way to the larger ranches further west. Now he found himself involved in what appeared to be a serious local dispute. Mrs. Patterson bustled into the kitchen, carrying a bundle of clothes. "My late husband's," she explained, handing them to Isaac. "They might be a bit short in the legs, but they're dry. You can change in the back room." "Thank you, madam," Isaac said. "How's Miss Reynolds?" "Shaken but stronger than she looks," Mrs. Patterson replied with approval. "That girl's got grit. Came here all alone from back east, looking to start fresh. Been working honest jobs since she arrived, cleaning, sewing, whatever she can find. Wilkes has had it out for her since she refused his advances at the saloon last week." Isaac frowned. "So the theft accusation." "Nonsense," Mrs. Patterson confirmed. "Theresa's been saving every penny, probably the most honest person in this town." After changing into the borrowed clothes, Isaac returned to the sitting room where Theresa sat wrapped in blankets before the fire. Her dark hair hung damp around her shoulders, but color had returned to her cheeks. "Mr. Blackett," she said, looking up as he entered. "I don't know how to thank you." Isaac settled into a chair across from her. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," she pointed out softly. "Everyone just watched, except you." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that neither could fully explain. Mrs. Patterson interrupted with cups of hot coffee laced with whiskey. "Drink this, both of you. Best remedy for a chill." As they sipped the warming brew, Theresa recounted her story. She'd come to Nogales 3 weeks ago after the death of her aunt in St. Louis, her last living relative. With nothing to keep her there and stories of opportunity in the West, she'd gathered her savings and purchased a stagecoach ticket. "I had $15 hidden in my boot," she explained. "My life savings. When I paid for a room at the boarding house with silver dollars, Wilkes must have assumed I stole them." "Why didn't the sheriff intervene?" Isaac asked. "Sheriff Taylor rode out to Tubac 2 days ago," Mrs. Patterson explained. "Some trouble with cattle rustlers. Wilkes took it as an opportunity to appoint himself judge and jury." Isaac's jaw tightened. "And executioner." "What will you do now?" Theresa asked, her voice small but steady. "Will you continue your journey west?" The question caught Isaac off guard. He'd planned to be in Tucson by the end of the week, but something about leaving Theresa vulnerable to Wilkes' retribution didn't sit right with him. "I reckon I might stay in Nogales a few days," he said carefully. "At least until the sheriff returns." Relief flickered across Theresa's face before she composed herself. "I wouldn't want to delay your plans, Mr. Blackett." "Isaac," he corrected gently, "and I'm in no particular hurry." Mrs. Patterson watched the exchange with knowing eyes. "You'll both stay here tonight," she declared. "No arguments. Theresa's room at the boarding house isn't safe with Wilkes on the warpath, and you, young man, need proper rest after that swim." Neither of them protested, grateful for the older woman's hospitality. That night, as Isaac lay on a narrow cot in Mrs. Patterson's spare room, he found himself replaying the day's events. The image of Theresa falling into the river haunted him, as did the memory of her weight in his arms as he carried her to safety. There was something about her, a quiet strength beneath her gentle demeanor, that intrigued him. In the adjacent room, Theresa too lay awake, her mind racing. She'd nearly died today, saved only by the intervention of a stranger who had risked his own life for hers. The sensation of Isaac's strong arms around her as he pulled her from the river remained vivid. In her 23 years, she'd never met anyone quite like him, someone who acted on principle without hesitation. Neither realized that the events of this single day would alter the course of both their lives irrevocably. Morning brought clear skies and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Isaac rose early, helping Mrs. Patterson with her chickens before breakfast. When Theresa joined them, her hair neatly braided and wearing a borrowed dress from their hostess, Isaac was struck again by her natural beauty. "Good morning," she greeted them with a shy smile. "I hope I haven't slept too late." "Not at all, dear," Mrs. Patterson assured her. "Sit down and have some breakfast. You need to regain your strength." As they ate, they discussed their options. The sheriff would return by evening, according to town gossip, but that still left the day to navigate. "Wilkes won't be happy I survived," Theresa acknowledged, her fork pausing midway to her mouth. "And he certainly won't appreciate being challenged, Isaac." The use of his first name felt natural, as if they'd known each other far longer than a single day. "I need to collect my things from the boarding house," she continued. "I can't impose on Mrs. Patterson's kindness indefinitely." "I'll accompany you," Isaac offered immediately. "Safety in numbers. Their walk through Nogales revealed the speed at which news traveled in small towns. People stopped to stare or whisper behind their hands as they passed. Some nodded respectfully to Isaac, impressed by his bravery. Others looked away, ashamed of their inaction the previous day. The boarding house was a two-story building with peeling paint and a sagging porch. The landlady, Mrs. Finch, met them at the door with visible relief. "Theresa, thank the Lord you're all right," she exclaimed. "When I heard what happened, well, I should have spoken up. I'm sorry." "It's all right, Mrs. Finch," Theresa assured her, though the words rang hollow. Fear had kept many silent, but their silence had nearly cost her life. Upstairs, Theresa's room was small and sparsely furnished, but neat as a pin. Isaac waited by the door as she gathered her few possessions: 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, a small Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents. "That's everything?" Isaac asked, surprised by how little she owned. Theresa nodded, a touch of defiance in her eyes. "I travel light." "Makes it easier to start over." Something in her tone suggested she'd had to start over more than once. Isaac found himself wondering about her past, the circumstances that had led her west alone. As they descended the stairs, the front door burst open. Jasper Wilkes stood in the entrance, flanked by 2 of his men. His bloodshot eyes narrowed when he spotted Theresa and Isaac. "Well, well," he drawled, blocking their path. "Looks like the little thief can swim after all." Isaac stepped protectively in front of Theresa. "Move aside, Wilkes. Sheriff Taylor will be back today, and I'm sure he'll be interested to hear about your unauthorized justice." Wilkes spat on the floor. "You think anyone in this town will testify against me? I own half the businesses in Nogales. People know better than to cross me." "I'll testify," came Mrs. Finch's voice from behind them. The landlady had appeared at the foot of the stairs, her normally timid demeanor replaced by determination. "What you did was attempted murder, Jasper Wilkes, and I won't stay silent about it." Wilkes looked momentarily taken aback before his expression hardened. "You'll regret that, Edith. Your little boarding house might have an unfortunate accident. Add threatening arson to your crimes," Isaac said evenly, his hand moving subtly toward his holster. "Now step aside." For a tense moment, it seemed Wilkes might refuse. Then, with a nasty smile, he moved away from the door. "This isn't over," he warned. "Not by a long shot." Once outside, Theresa released the breath she'd been holding. "Thank you, Mrs. Finch," she said, impulsively hugging the older woman. "That took real courage." Mrs. Finch patted her back. "It's past time someone stood up to him. You be careful now, both of you. Jasper doesn't make idle threats." As they walked back toward Mrs. Patterson's house, Isaac noticed Theresa trembling slightly despite the warm morning sun. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Just angry. I came here for a fresh start, not to be bullied by men like Wilkes. I've had enough of that to last a lifetime." Isaac sensed there was more to that statement, but he didn't press. Instead, he found himself saying, "I was thinking of inquiring about work at the Wilson Ranch outside town. Heard they might need hands, if I stay in Nogales at least until things settle." The hope that flickered across Theresa's face was unmistakable. "You think you might?" "Seems like the right thing to do," he replied, surprised by how much he meant it. By noon, rumors circulated that Sheriff Taylor would return earlier than expected. By 2 o'clock, his arrival was confirmed when his deputy was seen preparing the jail for potential occupants. Isaac and Theresa, along with Mrs. Patterson, made their way to the sheriff's office late in the afternoon. Taylor was a barrel-chested man with a silver mustache and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interruption as they recounted the events at the river. "This ain't the first time Wilkes has overstepped," the sheriff said when they'd finished. Been trying to build a case against him for months, but witnesses always seem to develop convenient memory problems. Will you arrest him? Theresa asked. Sheriff Taylor sighed. Attempted murder's a serious charge. With Mrs. Finch's testimony and yours, plus this young man as a witness to the actual event, I've got enough to hold him. But Wilkes has friends in high places, including the territorial judge. So he'll get away with it, Theresa concluded, disappointment evident in her voice. I didn't say that, Taylor corrected. Just warning you it won't be simple, and you both might want to watch your backs until this is resolved. As they left the sheriff's office, they noticed a crowd gathering outside Wilkes' saloon. Raised voices suggested an argument in progress. Let's avoid that, Isaac suggested, guiding Theresa down a side street. They had almost reached Mrs. Patterson's house when the sound of gunfire erupted behind them. Get down, Isaac ordered, pulling Theresa behind a water trough as two more shots rang out. People scattered in the street, diving for cover as the shooting continued. What's happening? Theresa gasped. Don't know, Isaac admitted, but I think the sheriff just got his chance to arrest Wilkes. His prediction proved accurate. By sundown, Jasper Wilkes had been taken into custody after shooting one of his own men in a drunken rage. The victim would survive, but the public nature of the attack witnessed by a dozen respectable citizens made it impossible to ignore. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Mrs. Patterson observed as they ate dinner that evening, the news of Wilkes' arrest spreading rapidly through town. For the first time since arriving in Nogales, Theresa felt truly safe. As she watched Isaac across the table, laughing at something Mrs. Patterson said, a warm feeling spread through her chest. She barely knew this man, yet in the space of a day, he'd become her protector, her ally, and perhaps something more. The following morning brought unexpected news. Sheriff Taylor arrived at Mrs. Patterson's door with information that Wilkes had been scheduling a gold shipment ambush. In the process of investigating the attempted murder charge, they discovered letters implicating Wilkes in a larger conspiracy. The territorial marshals taking him to Tucson for trial, Taylor explained. Between the attempted murder and the planned robbery, he'll be away for a good long while. Relief washed over Theresa. The nightmare was truly ending. There's something else, the sheriff continued, turning to Isaac. Wilson's foreman was in town this morning, heard about what you did at the river, said a man with that kind of character is welcome at their ranch. They're looking for an experienced hand. Isaac couldn't hide his surprise. That's good news, Sheriff, thank you. Don't thank me. Your actions spoke for themselves. The sheriff tipped his hat and departed, leaving them to consider this development. The Wilson Ranch is only 5 miles outside town, Mrs. Patterson noted innocently. Close enough to visit regularly. Theresa felt a blush rising to her cheeks at the implication. She busied herself with clearing breakfast dishes to hide her reaction. I should see about that position, Isaac said, rising from the table. Miss Reynolds, would you care to accompany me? The ride might do you good after everything that's happened. The invitation sent a flutter through Theresa's stomach. I'd like that, she replied, trying to keep her voice casual. If Mrs. Patterson can spare me. The older woman waved a hand dismissively. Go on, both of you. Enjoy the fine weather. An hour later, they were riding together down the dusty road leading west from Nogales. Isaac had borrowed a gentle mare for Theresa, who admitted she hadn't ridden much before coming west. You'll get used to it, he assured her. Out here, horses aren't a luxury, they're necessary. The Wilson Ranch sprawled across a valley nestled between rolling hills. Cattle grazed on sparse vegetation, while cowboys moved among them with practiced efficiency. The main house was an impressive 2-story structure with a wide porch and numerous outbuildings surrounding it. Frank Wilson himself met them in the yard, a stocky man in his 50s with weathered skin and calculating eyes. He listened as Isaac briefly explained his background and experience. "Sheriff Taylor vouched for you," Wilson said, "and that carries weight. We're short-handed since 2 of my men left for California. Job's yours if you want it." "I appreciate the opportunity, sir," Isaac replied. "Bunkhouse is over there," Wilson continued, jerking a thumb toward a long, low building. "Pays $25 a month plus room and board. We expect hard work and no trouble." "Yes, sir. When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning soon enough." Wilson's gaze shifted to Theresa. "And your lady friend?" Theresa blushed at the assumption but didn't correct him. "I'm staying in town, Mr. Wilson. Just accompanying Mr. Blackett today." Wilson nodded, seemingly satisfied. "My wife's always looking for help with sewing and such. If you're interested in occasional work, let her know." As they rode back toward town, a comfortable silence stretched between them. The reality of their situation was settling in. Isaac would be staying, working just outside Nogales. Theresa found herself unreasonably happy about this development. "What will you do now?" Isaac asked eventually. "With Wilkes gone, is there work for you in town?" Theresa considered the question. Mrs. Holloway mentioned needing help in her dress shop, and Mrs. Finch offered reduced rent if I help with the cooking at the boarding house. "I'll manage." Isaac nodded, seemingly relieved. "Good, that's good." Another silence fell, this one charged with unspoken thoughts. "I'm glad you're staying," Theresa finally admitted softly. "I know it's foolish, we barely know each other, but after what happened—" "It's not foolish," Isaac interrupted gently. "I feel it too. Some connections don't need years to form." The simple acknowledgement sent warmth spreading through Theresa's chest. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence, both aware that something significant had begun between them. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Isaac worked at the Wilson Ranch during the week, riding into town most Sundays to attend church services. He always found Theresa waiting on Mrs. Patterson's porch afterward, ready for their now traditional Sunday dinner together. Theresa secured steady work at both the dress shop and boarding house, establishing herself as a reliable, skilled worker. The ladies of Nogales discovered her talent with a needle, and soon she had more mending and alteration work than she could handle. For the first time since arriving in Arizona, she began to feel truly settled. Their courtship progressed slowly, properly. Isaac never presumed, always asking permission before taking her hand or helping her onto a horse. They shared stories of their pasts during long rides in the countryside, Isaac's childhood in Texas, his years working cattle drives, his dream of someday owning land. Theresa spoke of growing up in Missouri, losing her parents to influenza when she was 18, the broken engagement to a man who proved false when her modest inheritance was depleted. Each revelation brought them closer, building a foundation of trust and understanding. By midsummer, their Sunday meetings had expanded to include Saturday evenings whenever Isaac could get away from the ranch. They attended town socials together, drawing knowing smiles from the older ladies and envious glances from younger ones. "You're blooming like a desert flower after rain," Mrs. Patterson observed one evening as she helped Theresa prepare for a dance. "Love suits you, my dear." Theresa paused in brushing her hair. "Is it that obvious?" the older woman chuckled. "To everyone except perhaps you and Isaac. The way you look at each other speaks volumes." Theresa couldn't deny the truth of it. Her feelings for Isaac had deepened with each passing week. His steady presence, his quiet strength, his unfailing kindness all had combined to create something she'd never expected to find in Nogales. hope for a future filled with happiness. That evening at the dance, held in the newly constructed town hall, Isaac surprised her by arriving in a crisp white shirt and new vest. His dark hair was neatly combed, his boots polished to a shine. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her, his blue eyes appreciative as they took in the pale green dress she'd sewn herself. "You're quite handsome yourself," she returned, feeling uncharacteristically bold. They danced every set together, Isaac proving surprisingly graceful for a cowboy. During a break for refreshments, he led her outside where lanterns illuminated the wooden porch. "I've been saving," he told her, his voice soft in the evening air. "Wilson's paying good wages, and there's a small plot of land for sale 3 miles north of town. Good water, decent grazing." Theresa's heart quickened. "You're thinking of buying it," Isaac nodded, suddenly looking nervous. "It's not much, just 40 acres, but it's a start. Could build a small house, raise some cattle." "It sounds wonderful," she said sincerely. "It would be," he agreed, taking her hands in his, "with the right partner." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. Theresa held her breath, hardly daring to hope he meant what she thought he did. "Theresa," Isaac continued, his voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes, "I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're the bravest, kindest woman I've ever met. Would you consider a future together, with me?" Joy bubbled up inside her, making it difficult to speak. "Yes," she managed finally, squeezing his hands. "Yes, I would." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Isaac bent his head and kissed her. It was gentle, respectful, but filled with promise. When they parted, both were breathless. "I should speak to Reverend Collins," Isaac said, referring to Nogales minister, "and we'll need to arrange everything properly." Theresa laughed, charmed by his determination to do everything correctly. "There's time, Isaac. We have time now." The weeks that followed were filled with planning and preparation. Isaac purchased the land, spending every spare moment clearing space for a small house. The men from the Wilson Ranch helped raise the frame in a day, a traditional building effort that brought the community together. Theresa, meanwhile, prepared for her new life. She sewed linens and curtains, collected kitchen necessities, and endured good-natured teasing from the town's matrons about the joys and challenges of marriage. Mrs. Patterson insisted on hosting the wedding at her home. "You're like a daughter to me," she told Theresa, waving away protests. "Let me do this for you both." On a bright September morning, with wildflowers still dotting the hills around Nogales, Theresa Reynolds became Theresa Blackett in a simple ceremony attended by the friends they'd made. She wore a cream-colored dress with lace she'd carefully salvaged from her mother's wedding gown, carried all the way from Missouri. Isaac, standing tall and proud in a new suit, stumbled slightly over his vows, his voice thick with emotion. When Reverend Collins pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers from the small gathering seemed to echo across the valley. Their first night in their new home, still partly under construction, but with one room completed, was a blend of nervousness and discovery. Isaac's tenderness dissolved Theresa's initial anxiety, and they found in each other a passion neither had fully anticipated. "I never thought I'd find this," Theresa whispered in the darkness, her head resting on his chest. "When I came west, I was just running away from bad memories. I never imagined I'd find someone to run toward." Isaac's arms tightened around her. "When I dove into that river, I was just trying to save a life. I didn't know I was saving my own future." Life settled into a rhythm. Isaac continued working at the Wilson Ranch while developing their own property in his spare time. Under his careful management, their small herd of cattle purchased with his savings began to grow. Theresa maintained her work at the dress shop 2 days a week, her reputation for fine stitching bringing customers from as far as Tubac. Their house expanded room by room as time and resources allowed. Theresa planted a garden, coaxing vegetables and herbs from the reluctant desert soil. They added chickens, a milk cow, and eventually a sturdy workhorse to complement Isaac's faithful buckskin. Winter came and went, bringing with it unexpected rain that transformed the landscape around Nogales. Spring arrived with wildflowers and the news that Theresa was expecting their first child. Isaac's reaction to the announcement was everything she could have hoped for: joy, wonder, and fierce protectiveness that manifested in his insistence that she rest more and lift nothing heavier than a teacup. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she protested, laughing at his concern. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my baby," he countered, kissing her forehead. "Not my wife." Their son was born on a scorching July day in 1879, nearly a year after they'd met. They named him Daniel after Isaac's father. Strong and healthy from the start, with a shock of dark hair and his mother's brown eyes, he became the center of their world. As Daniel grew, so did their ranch. Isaac gradually reduced his time at the Wilson property, focusing more on their own expanding operation. With careful management and some fortunate rainfall years, they added another 30 acres to their land. Nogales itself was changing too, growing as the railroad expanded through the territory. New businesses opened, more families arrived, and the rough edges of frontier life gradually smoothed. Sheriff Taylor still maintained order, though with less frequency of serious crime as the town established itself as a respectable community. In the spring of 1882, their daughter Elizabeth joined the family, completing their happiness. Theresa often marveled at how far they'd come from that terrible day at the river. What had begun as the worst moment of her life had led, through Isaac's courage, to everything she'd ever wanted. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their completed house watching Daniel, now 3, chase fireflies while baby Elizabeth slept in her cradle nearby, Isaac took Theresa's hand. "You ever think about that day?" he asked quietly. "At the river?" Theresa nodded. "More often than you might expect. Not the fear, though. I think about how you didn't hesitate, you just dove in after a stranger." "Best decision I ever made," Isaac replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "Jasper Wilkes did us a favor in a twisted way," Theresa mused. "Without his cruelty, we might never have met." Isaac's expression darkened momentarily. They'd heard that Wilkes had died in prison the previous winter, his health broken by years of hard labor. Neither mourned him, but neither celebrated his passing either. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Isaac said finally. "Some things are just meant to be." As the sun set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Theresa leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, contentment washing over her. From the darkest moment of her life had come its greatest joy: a family, a home, a love that had begun with a desperate dive into dangerous waters. They'd built something precious together here in the wild territory of Arizona, something that had seemed impossible that day on the plank. A life full of purpose, of belonging, of love. "I think you're right," she said softly, watching their son's delighted face as he captured a glowing insect in his small hands. "Some things are meant to be." In the years that followed, the Blackett Ranch prospered. Isaac's knowledge of cattle breeding and Theresa's careful management of their finances allowed them to expand further, eventually becoming one of the most successful operations in the area. Daniel grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's affinity for ranching. while Elizabeth showed her mother's talent with needle and thread, along with a surprising head for business. They added a third child in 1885, another boy they named James, who from an early age demonstrated a curious mind and love of books. Theresa ensured all three children received proper education, first at home and later at the school established in Nogales. As Arizona moved toward statehood, the changes it brought affected the Blacketts as well. New technologies, improved transportation, and expanding markets all presented opportunities that Isaac, with his forward-thinking approach, was quick to embrace. Through it all, their partnership remained the foundation upon which everything else was built. The love that had begun so dramatically at the river crossing deepened with shared joys and sorrows, the raising of children, and the building of a legacy that extended beyond their own lives. On rare occasions, visitors to the ranch would hear the remarkable story of how the Blacketts had met of a woman forced to walk the plank, and the cowboy who dove in after her, changing both their destinies forever. It became something of a local legend, embellished slightly with each telling, but at its heart remaining a true tale of courage, chance, and the unexpected ways in which lives can intertwine. Isaac and Theresa Blackett would often exchange knowing smiles when they overheard these recountings, their hands finding each other's automatically, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd come from that fateful day on the Rio Grande. For in the vast, untamed landscape of the Arizona Territory, they had found not just survival, but a love story written in the language of the frontier, resilient, enduring, and as boundless as the western sky.